Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, like engineering or something.
Right, like a mechanic looking at an engine.
Yeah, exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is, broken.
It's physical reality. Unarguable.
Right? But then you step into the world of human meaning, like how we structure our societies, our economies, or even, our own minds, and suddenly that x-ray machine just completely
It
shatters.
really does. It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Yeah. We treat the systems running our lives like they are broken bones, but they're actually ghosts.
Ghosts.
Ghosts we've decided to treat as if they are made of solid concrete.
And the danger there is that we don't realize we're staring at ghosts. I mean, we build entire civilizations and, well, entire personal identities on top of things that do not physically exist.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because for you, the endlessly curious learner tuning in today, we are going to give you a framework that fundamentally alters how you look at reality itself.
That's the goal. A complete paradigm shift.
Exactly. We are diving into a truly fascinating document we reviewed called Concept.pdf, which outlines a way to become the architect of your own meaning.
It's a brilliant text.
It really is. So we're doing a double feature masterclass of sorts today. Part one, we're going to look outward at the what the text calls the surface architecture of our reality.
Which is basically how humanity accidentally turns concepts into invisible monarchies.
Invisible monarchies. I love that phrase. And we'll talk about how to test reality using this thing called the medial test. And then for part two, we're going to turn that lens inward.
Right, applying a specific framework called the 4DP.
Yes. Target, truth, totally title. We'll use that to decode how this abstraction worship corrupts our own minds and how to strip concepts of their false divinity.
Because the overarching goal here is emancipatory. It's about freedom.
Freedom from the ghosts.
Exactly. I mean, we live in a world of absolute information overload where we are constantly, every single day, mistaking our descriptions of reality for reality itself.
We confuse the map with the terrain.
Yes. And when you do that, you become what the framework calls a ceremonial servant to abstractions.
Ceremonial servant. Wow. We're all walking around bowing to things that don't actually exist in the physical world.
We are. So our mission for this deep dive is to give you, the listener, a precise toolkit to stop being that servant.
Yeah.
To peel back the layers, reveal the raw material machinery underneath, and, well, start redesigning it.
Start redesigning it. Okay, so to understand how to redesign our reality, we first have to understand the fundamental error we make every single day. The original sin of human cognition, if you will.
Mistaking meaning for matter.
Right, mistaking meaning for matter.
The document calls this the category error. It describes it as entering a hall of mirrors.
A hall of mirrors, okay.
But to understand how we get trapped in the hall of mirrors, we have to start with a baseline of why the mirrors even exist in the first place. Because human beings cannot live without concepts.
No, of course not. We'd be animals.
Right. The text makes a foundational point here. It says, meaning is architecture.
Meaning is architecture. So we build these structures in our minds just to be able to operate.
We have to. The moment human experience needs to be shared between two people, abstractions must appear.
Because we have to form categories, right?
Right.
Laws, metrics, currency.
Exactly. Raw physical sensation alone doesn't scale into a civilization.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, I can't just grunt and point at a river to build a massive suspension bridge. I have to be able to say the word bridge, or tomorrow, or debt.
Yeah, and have the other person understand the exact parameters of those ideas so you can coordinate your minds across space and time.
Precisely. It is the ultimate compression algorithm.
I love thinking about it that way. A compression algorithm. We compress massive amounts of physical reality and future intent and complex human labor into a single word.
Yes. So we can actually work together without having to physically demonstrate every single thing we mean.
Right. Which is amazing. That compression algorithm is basically the triumph of the human species.
It is. But the danger, and this is where the category error happens, the danger arises when this shorthand hardens into ontology.
Okay, let's define that for everyone. Ontology, meaning our understanding of what actually physically exists.
Correct. We start behaving as though a concept isn't just a human instrument for compressing and guiding action, but a thing with agency in its own right.
Like it's a living creature.
Yes.
Yeah.
We elevate concepts into these invisible monarchies. We grant them thrones.
Okay, I was trying to picture the mechanics of this, and it reminds me of playing a massive multiplayer video game.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine millions of people playing this game, and there's a giant digital scoreboard hovering in the sky of the game world.
Right, keeping track of the stats.
Exactly. At first, everyone knows it's just keeping track of points, but over time, generation after generation, everyone starts bowing down to the scoreboard.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. They start making sacrifices to it. They say things like, the scoreboard requires us to work harder today, or we must appease the scoreboard to bring rain.
Yes.
And they completely forget that the scoreboard is literally just a digital tally of the physical actions being taken by the actual real players on the ground.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You are mistaking the measurement for the maker.
Mistaking the measurement for the maker.
You're treating the tally as if it has its own hands and its own will. And the prime example the text gives for this in our real world, the ultimate scoreboard we bow down to, is the economy.
Oh, yes. The economy, capital T, capital E. We talk about it like it's Zeus sitting on Mount Olympus throwing lightning bolts.
We really do. Just listen to the language we use every time there's a fiscal shift. We treat it exactly like an angry weather god.
Yeah, you hear pundits and politicians say stuff like, the economy requires sacrifice.
Or the economy is punishing the middle class today. Or the market is angry.
The market is angry, like it has emotions. But if we strip away the abstraction, what is the economy physically? I mean, it's not a beast lurking behind a curtain.
No. Physically, the economy cannot pick up a stone. It cannot stop a flood. It cannot hold a crying child or build a house.
It can't do anything.
Right. It is merely a name. It is a shorthand label we use to describe the consequences of countless physical placements and actions happening across the globe.
So when we say the economy is bad, what we're actually describing is physical matter and human bodies in a specific arrangement.
Exactly. We are describing laws being written on paper by human hands. We are describing physical goods being withheld in metal shipping containers at a port.
Or land being fenced off with actual wood and wire.
Yes. Trucks being routed down specific asphalt highways by human drivers, and real physical human bodies skipping actual caloric meals. The economy is just matter in arrangement. Yeah. Institutions operationalized through bodies.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. Why is it so dangerous to use the shorthand? I mean, saying the economy is bad is a lot faster than saying 2 million truck drivers are sick and 20,000 shipping containers are locked.
It is faster, yeah.
So what does this abstraction worship actually do to us as a society? Why is it a problem?
Because it creates a profound vulnerability to what the author calls a theatrical unreality. The danger isn't the shorthand itself. The shorthand is useful.
Right.
The danger is confusing interpretive centrality with material sovereignty.
Okay, let's break that down. Interpretive centrality, what does that mean?
Interpretive centrality means a concept is highly central to how we interpret and navigate the world. Money, markets, laws, these are extremely central to our interpretation of daily life.
Sure, I need money to buy groceries. It's central.
Exactly. But material sovereignty means something has independent physical power in the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism.
Oh, okay. So it acts on its own, regardless of us.
Right. When we confuse the two, people start speaking as if labels themselves are levers, as if naming a thing is the same as physically placing it.
Wow. So if you believe the economy is a god, you can't fix a broken supply chain or a starvation crisis, because how do you fight a god?
You don't. You just have to wait for the weather to change.
The abstraction creates this thick fog that obscures the actual levers we could be pulling?
If the economy is a god, we just perform ceremonies.
Like lowering interest rates.
Exactly. We lower an interest rate, which is a purely symbolic, conceptual act, and we pray that this ceremony somehow magically forces the metal shipping containers to move faster.
We lose sight of the physical mechanics of our own world.
Completely.
So we are trapped in this theatrical unreality, bowing to the scoreboard. We need a diagnostic tool to snap us out of it.
We do.
Yeah.
We need something to instantly differentiate between a human concept and physical reality.
And the framework gives us this brilliant, brutal thought experiment to do exactly that.
The meteor test.
The meteor test. I love this part.
It is the ultimate reality check. It is designed to clear the illusion of the Hall of Mirrors instantly. The scenario is very simple. Imagine a massive, world-ending meteor hurtling through space, heading straight for Earth.
Big, rocky, terrifying, traveling at like 40,000 miles an hour.
Right. Now, ask yourself, does the meteor negotiate with the economy?
No, obviously not.
Does it check market competence before impact? Does it pause to consider the sentiment of the stock market or the political ideology of the country it's about to hit? Does it alter its trajectory because a parliament vigorously debated economic growth or because a billionaire threw a tantrum?
It doesn't even know what a billionaire is.
Exactly. A meteor answers strictly to mass, velocity, angle, composition, and impact. It answers to what is physically there.
It operates entirely in the realm of material sovereignty.
Yes, the meteor does not care about our concepts. It does not care about our invisible monarchies.
Okay, wait, I'm stuck on something here. Let me push back on this, because if I'm listening, I'm immediately finding a loophole.
Go for it.
If money doesn't matter to the meteor, how do we explain the fact that billionaires can build underground concrete bunkers and survive?
Ugh.
Clearly, the concept of wealth does shield them from the physical impact. Doesn't that prove the concept has real physical power?
That is the exact trap of the middleman.
The middleman.
Yes, and the text specifically addresses this to map out a sober middle path. We're not saying concepts are nothing. Claiming concepts have zero impact would be a completely different kind of category error.
Right, because obviously money matters.
Abstractions are incredibly consequential. They are highly transmissive. They move through language, habit, and institutions with astonishing speed. But, and this is the crucial distinction you have to lock on to their force, is always mediated.
Mediated. They always require a middleman to interact with the physical world.
Exactly. The concept of money cannot, by mystical exertion, alter the meteor's path. Money isn't shielding the billionaire. Concrete is shielding them.
Steel is shielding them.
The physical displacement of Earth is shielding them. Money works entirely by recruiting bodies and arranging matter.
So a dollar has to be printed, authenticated, accepted, and spent.
Yes. It requires a chemical signal in a trader's brain, a spoken command, a legal contract written on pulped wood, and physical security guards to enforce the property line.
So, stripped of human enactment, the abstraction does not stand there acting alone.
No, if you put a digital bank ledger in an open field, it cannot divert a falling object.
Right. Human beings materialize the concept.
Human hands operate the machines,
Yeah.
and the machines mix the concrete, and the concrete resists the meteor. The concept doesn't have direct physical agency. It merely organizes the agents who do.
There's this brilliant miniature argument in the text regarding a paper banknote that really brings this linear reality deduction home. Think about a $100 bill. If you hold that paper banknote up to the meteor, what actually happens?
Well, the physical paper can interact with the meteor.
Right.
The paper will burn on contact. It will be shredded by the atmospheric pressure and the kinetic force.
Because at that level, the banknote isn't a concept. It is a physical object. It is cotton fiber, it is ink, it has measurable weight, it is combustible matter, it exists in the field of physics.
Exactly.
But the abstract value assigned to that ink, the purchasing power of $100, cannot touch the meteor. The denomination printed on the paper has no mass, it cannot burn, because it was never physically there to begin with.
The text states something so profound here. It says, wisdom begins when we remember the difference between symbolic assignment and material participation.
Symbolic assignment versus material participation. That is huge.
Human beings constantly confuse our dependence on a symbol with its metaphysical status. Because we depend on money so profoundly for our physical survival, we need it for food, for shelter, for medicine. We slowly elevate it in our minds.
We grant it false sovereignty.
Yes. We start treating it as if it's an elemental force like gravity or fire, rather than a social agreement we continually renew.
We've built an entire civilization out of symbolic assignments, and we've forgotten how to see the material participation underneath. We've lost the ability to see the concrete and the steel, and we only see the dollar signs.
And this brings us to the profound psychological and societal damage that occurs when we fail to deduce material reality from symbolic reality.
Right. What happens when things go wrong?
When a concept is granted this false sovereignty, it stops being a tool. It dominates our thought. The concept becomes a throne.
And as we said earlier, we become the ceremonial servants. So what happens when we do this? What is the actual fallout of building these thrones?
The framework breaks down 3 catastrophic failures that inevitably follow when a society or an individual worships abstractions.
Okay, let's go through them. The first one is the displacement of responsibility.
Right. This is the act of hiding behind a fog of grandeur. We say things like, the market decided, or history demanded it, or perhaps the most common modern iteration, The algorithm did it.
Oh man, the algorithm. Think about the last time you heard a company announce massive layoffs or the last time a creator's audience plummeted overnight. The universal excuse is always, well, the algorithm changed. The algorithm didn't favor us.
And look at what that phrasing accomplishes mechanistically. It completely conceals the actual human agents, the actual designs, and the actual physical placements behind the curtain.
Because an algorithm didn't decide anything. It has no volition.
None. A human being wrote a sorting system. A human being defined a threshold for engagement. A human being deployed a specific sequence of code on a physical server.
But by blaming the abstraction, the algorithm, the humans who actually arrange the matter escape all responsibility.
It's the perfect scapegoat.
Mhm.
You can't sue the market. You can't protest history.
Right. If a middle manager uses software to track keystrokes and fires someone for falling below like 85% efficiency, they can look that person in the eye and say, I'm sorry, the system flagged you.
They displace their own human agency onto a ghost.
Which leads directly into the second failure, passivity.
Passivity. If an abstraction is imagined as a force of nature, people stop examining the constructed mechanisms beneath it.
Because you don't argue with gravity. If you think the economy operates like gravity, you don't question it. You just accept that things hold out.
Exactly. If it's a force of nature, you don't ask who wrote the rule. You don't ask who benefits from the specific metric being used. You don't ask who enforces the artificial scarcity.
You just accept it as natural law.
The concept is treated as though it descends from the sky, rather than arising from layered, highly specific human activity.
If a hurricane is coming, all you can do is board up your windows. You don't try to change the weather. By treating human systems like weather systems, we induce massive societal passivity,
We just board up our windows and accept the storm.
completely ignoring the fact that we built the storm machine ourselves.
Right. And the third failure is perhaps the most insidious
Yeah.
because it operates on a deep psychological level. It is emotional submission.
Emotional submission. This is where Reverence teaches people to protect the prestige of a concept, even when its current physical implementation is visibly destructive to human life.
Defending symbols against reality.
Yes, people will preserve the sanctity of the economy while actual physical neighborhoods hollow out and human beings starve.
They will defend the concept of merit and hard work, while the actual physical gates of opportunity are clearly being inherited through wealth rather than earned.
They will protect the idea of institutional stability while the physical structure of the institution is actively rotting and harming people.
The abstraction is no longer serving human thought. It is dominating it. The symbol becomes more important than the physical reality it was supposed to represent.
Think about a time at work or in your daily life where a blatantly terrible decision was handed down and it was justified by company policy or the system.
We've all been there.
Right. And everyone in the room knew it was a bad decision. Everyone knew it was going to cause physical stress, wasted hours, lost sleep. But nobody fought back because you were arguing against the policy.
You feel entirely helpless because you are wrestling with a phantom.
It induces a profound sense of learned helplessness. You are being governed by your own symbols. You are locked in a prison where you are both the inmate and the architect of the invisible bars.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Now, everything we've talked about so far has been on a macro level. Society, the economy, markets, algorithms. But the causality here runs deep. The exact same human brain that invents the economy and bows down to it is the brain you use to invent your own personal identity.
It is. The theatrical unreality doesn't just ruin societies. It completely corrupts our internal personal operating systems.
It scales perfectly from the macro to the micro. The abstraction worship we see in global markets is happening inside your own head right now regarding who you are and what you are capable of.
And this is where we transition into the internal architecture. Part 2 of our deep dive.
Yes. How do we map this internal hall of mirrors? The text provides a masterful, highly specific synthesis for diagnosing this internal architecture called the 4DP framework.
The 4-dimensional pillars: target, truth, totally, and title.
Target, truth, totally, and title. Let's dig in.
These are 4 interdependent pillars of personal architecture. They are the mechanisms by which you construct meaning in your own life.
And just like structural pillars in a physical building, if you skip or compromise even one of them, the entire structure eventually collapses under load.
It's exactly like load-bearing walls in a house. You can't just build 3 strong walls, leave the 4th one out, and expect the roof to stay up when a storm hits.
Every single pillar must be structurally sound. So let's break these down deeply because this is the toolkit for redesigning your reality. Pillar 1, target.
Target represents where you are actually aiming your life. But the framework makes a critical mechanistic distinction here. A target must be a goal, not a rigid plan.
A goal versus a plan. On the surface, people use those words interchangeably. What is the mechanistic difference?
The difference is how your brain processes navigation. Think of an archer.
Okay, an archer.
The target is the physical bullseye painted on a tree on the horizon. That's the goal. But the path the arrow takes, that path must remain flexible.
Because of the environment.
Exactly. It depends on the crosswind, the tension of the bowstring, the angle of elevation, the humidity in the air. A rigid plan is an algorithm. A plan says the arrow must travel exactly 47 degrees northeast at 120 feet per second.
And if the wind changes even slightly?
The rigid plan shatters and the arrow misses.
Plans are brittle. If step 3 of a 10-step plan fails, you panic. You think the whole endeavor is ruined because you are worshiping the plan, the extraction, instead of focusing on the physical target.
A flexible goal, a true target says, hit the bullseye and adjust every single variable dynamically as conditions demand. It's heuristic navigation.
You allow the physical reality of the moment to dictate the method, rather than forcing a pre-written concept onto reality.
When you worship the concept of the plan, you lose the ability to navigate the terrain.
Which brings us to the second pillar, which is the bedrock for the target. Pillar 2, truth.
Truth. This is radical self-honesty and fidelity to reality as it actually is. Not what you wish it to be, not what you fear it to be, not what the abstraction tells you it should be.
And this is incredibly difficult because the human brain is metabolically wired to avoid difficult truths.
It burns calories to face reality. The brain uses cognitive dissonance and psychological defense mechanisms to dodge the truth, because facing it requires a massive expenditure of energy to redesign your worldview.
We create these useful fictions. We say, oh, I just don't have time to work out or start that project, when the radical truth is that we do have the time. We're just prioritizing the comfort of watching television.
Or we say, I'm just not naturally good at public speaking. When the radical truth is that we are terrified of the vulnerability of being judged, so we tell ourselves a story to avoid trying.
Truth is the absolute foundation. Let's map it back to navigation. If you lie to yourself about where you are starting from, your target becomes completely delusional.
Think of a GPS system. A GPS system, no matter how advanced, cannot give you directions to your target if you lie to it about your current starting location.
Wow, yeah. If you want to change your life but you refuse to accept the truth of your current habits, your current fears, and your current physical reality, you are building a house on a rented foundation. The third pillar is totally. T-O-T-A-L-L-Y. This measures the degree of your commitment. Are you all in or are you hedging?
The text refers to this as dimensional wholeness. It means seeing all the layers of a situation, the risks, the physical constraints, the required effort, and committing to it fully, rather than keeping one foot out the door.
Hedging. Why do we do that?
Hedging is essentially a trauma response to abstraction worship.
How so?
When you worship an abstraction, let's say the concept of social prestige or what people will think, you become terrified of failing in the eyes of that invisible monarch.
So to protect yourself, you never commit.
Totally.
Right. You give like 70% effort.
Yeah.
That way, if you fail, you can tell yourself, well, I didn't really try my hardest anyway. You fragment your cognitive load.
You sacrifice your actual physical potential in a real world to protect your standing with a ghost. You hedge your bet so you never have to face the truth of your own limitations.
Precisely. If you are not totally committed, you are almost always submitting to an external abstraction. You are holding back physical energy to serve a symbolic fear. And that leads us to the fourth pillar, which might be the most paradigm-shifting part of the internal architecture. Title.
Title. The framework calls these noun ships.
Noun ships. I love that word.
Noun ships are about linguistic framing. They deal with how we name ourselves and our states of being. The goal of title is coherent naming without permanent binding.
Holding your identity lightly.
Exactly. Most people lock their identity into rigid, permanent nouns. They say, I am a failure. I am an anxious person. I am an addict.
We take a temporary emotional or physical state and we fuse it to our core identity. We turn a transient condition into a life sentence.
Linguistic determinism plays a huge role here. The phrase I am is incredibly powerful for the brain's neuroplasticity. When you say I am a failure, your brain accepts that noun as a structural reality, like a concrete wall.
It stops looking for solutions because, well, that's just what you are.
A noun ship recognizes that these are temporary modes of operation.
So instead of saying, I am a failure, which is a permanent trap, you say, I am in failure mode right now.
Or instead of I am an anxious person, you say I am currently experiencing a high state of anxiety.
It separates your essence from a transient condition. You hold the title lightly. Failure mode is a diagnostic state that you can troubleshoot and exit.
But a failure is a permanent identity. When you worship the noun, you lose the verb. You lose the ability to act, change, and redesign.
So let's tie this entire internal architecture back to the category error from the first half of our deep dive. How does our habit of turning concepts into thrones completely corrupt the 40P?
It hijacks the entire mechanism. Let's trace the causal chain. Suppose you lie to yourself about the economy being an all-powerful God that dictates your worth. That is a fundamental collapse of the truth pillar.
Because you are not seeing material reality, you are seeing a phantom.
And because your truth pillar is compromised, your target pillar starts leaning. You set a delusional target.
Like spending 10 years chasing an inherited goal, maybe a specific, highly prestigious job title. Not because you actually want to do the physical daily labor of that job, but because you think the concept of prestige will protect you from the god of the economy.
Exactly. But chasing a symbol always leaves you physically empty. And because you are chasing something that doesn't physically sustain you, you are never totally committed to your actual life.
Your totally pillar crumbles. You are half in, constantly exhausted, performing for external validation rather than engaging in dimensional wholeness.
And finally, because you are exhausted and unfulfilled, you stumble. And when you stumble, your title pillar collapses. You look at your situation and you say, I am a failure.
You become a ceremonial servant to the abstraction of success, and your entire personal architecture comes crashing down under the weight of ghosts.
You built an entire life reacting to phantoms, completely ignoring the physical constraints and possibilities of the actual materials around you.
Wow. So we have seen the trap. We know exactly how we build these thrones out of concepts, both out in the macro world of society and inside the micro world of our own minds. But this deep dive isn't just about diagnosing the illness. It's about the cure.
It is. We need to execute the ultimate goal of the framework, stripping these concepts of their false divinity so we can finally redesign the machinery of our lives.
This is where we apply the meteor test internally as a daily practice. When you do this, whole systems, both global and personal, begin to look profoundly different. The grandeur peels away, and you are left with the raw mechanics.
When you stop looking at the economy as an angry weather god, it immediately resolves into concrete material things you can actually interact with.
It resolves into written contracts.
Yeah.
Supply chains, property law, land use, transportation logistics, energy grids, computer code, and most importantly, human habit.
Money stops being this mystical, elemental force. It resolves into digital tokens, humming servers, written ledgers, physical threats of force, legal permissions, and accounting procedures.
It resolves into a set of shared beliefs that only remain effective because human beings repeatedly wake up every morning and physically embody them.
And realizing this, breaking down the abstraction into its mechanical parts, isn't just being a pedantic dictionary nerd. It is profoundly emancipatory.
Emancipatory precision, that is the exact term used in the text.
Because think about the alternative. If you say, the system is immovable, capitalism is a god, the algorithm is omnipotent, you are left feeling completely helpless, passive, and depressed.
You can't fight a god.
But with emancipatory precision, you can look at the exact same scenario and ask a much better, highly actionable question.
Which parts of this system are actual physical constraints and which parts are just repeated agreements defended by human habit?
That is the pivotal shift in human consciousness. If you identify a physical constraint like gravity, or the biological need for sleep, or the geographic distance between two cities, you have to work with it. You must respect material sovereignty.
You design an airplane to work with the physical constraints of aerodynamics. You don't ignore them.
But if it's a repeated agreement defended by habit, like a toxic corporate culture that demands you answer emails at midnight, or a societal expectation about what success looks like, or an outdated identity you've given yourself, you realize it has no mass.
It has no velocity.
You can simply stop agreeing to it.
You can rewrite the code. You can withdraw your material participation from the symbolic assignment. And this brings us to the ultimate state the framework aims for, accessing the metamind.
The text describes the metamind as the observer, the architect. It is the quiet, structural intelligence beneath the noisy chatter of your everyday thoughts.
It's like sitting in the audience watching a play, being completely absorbed in the drama, the theatrical unreality on stage, and suddenly realizing you aren't just an audience member. You can walk up onto the stage. You can be the director.
By debugging our mental operating system, by constantly recognizing that the mind interprets reality rather than creates the physical terrain, we shift from being an unconscious user of our life to becoming an administrator.
We get the admin password to our own minds.
We realize the map is not the terrain. The menu is not the meal. Value is not mass. Reverence is not physical force.
Once the machinery is visible, redesign becomes imaginable. You are no longer reacting to phantoms hiding in a hall of mirrors. You are working with the raw, tangible materials of reality.
You see the contracts, the habits, the literal physical walls, and you can choose whether to reinforce them or tear them down.
So if you're listening to this right now, you are empowered in this exact moment to ask yourself a radically different set of questions. What meaning will I actually create today?
How will I shape my story from the ordinary physical materials of my actual life rather than sacrificing my energy to the ghosts I've been worshiping?
It is the definitive shift from being a passenger to being the architect. And it requires that radical self-honesty we talked about in the truth pillar.
You have to look at the doors in your life, the obstacles, the rejections, the anxieties, and ask what room they are actually attached to. Are you fighting a physical threshold, a real barrier made of matter? Or are you just fighting the architecture of a concept you built in your own mind?
Okay, let's trace the massive journey we've taken today. We started by exploring the original category error, how humans, out of a desperate need to coordinate and communicate, accidentally build thrones out of our concepts.
We elevate meaning into matter, and we become ceremonial servants to our own shorthand.
We then introduced the meteor test as an immediate, visceral diagnostic tool to separate material reality mass, velocity, impact from symbolic illusion like prestige, market confidence, or algorithmic authority.
We learn to differentiate between mediated force and physical agency.
We saw how failing that test leads to the displacement of responsibility, massive societal passivity, and emotional submission to symbols over actual human well-being. Then we brought the entire architecture inward.
We mapped how this theatrical unreality corrupts our 40p, how a lack of truth distorts our target, diminishes our totally commitment, and locks us into permanent title nounships.
And finally, we learned that by utilizing emancipatory precision, we can strip away the false divinity of these abstractions. We can resolve the ghosts back into the material machinery of physical constraints, written agreements, and daily habits.
Ultimately empowering us to step into the role of administrator and redesign our physical and mental lives.
It is a fundamental operating system upgrade for how you view everything around you. You'll never look at a headline about the economy the same way again.
It changes the lens completely, and it leaves us with a final, vital challenge.
Let's hear it.
The text reminds us of a blunt, beautiful truth. Gravity does not pause for branding. Fire does not respect job titles. Infection does not read account balances. The physical world only answers to physical realities.
The meteor doesn't care about your prestige.
It does not. So, as you move through your week, I want you to look closely at the insurmountable obstacles in your life. The things causing you deep stress, the things holding you back from your target. Ask yourself, is this obstacle a physical meteor with actual mass and velocity that I need to build a concrete shelter against?
Or is it just branding that I've been bowing down to?
Is it a true physical constraint or just a repeated agreement I keep consenting to out of habit? Once you know the difference, what will you choose to redesign first?
Just remember, the scoreboard is just a tally. You are the player on the ground. The game is entirely yours to play. Keep playing, keep building your own meaning, and we will see you on the next deep dive.